The sun was setting over the city skyline as Andre Williams stepped out of his sleek black car. The valet rushed forward, keys extended. Andre straightened his perfectly tailored navy suit and handed over his keys with a polite nod. After 14 hours of negotiations, he had finally closed the deal that would change everything for his company. "Enjoy your evening, sir," the young valet said, his eyes widening slightly as he recognized the man standing before him. Andre smiled. "Thank you." He had grown used to that look, that brief moment when people realized who he was. At 45, he had built Rise Up Technologies from nothing into a billion-dollar company, his face occasionally appearing in business magazines and tech blogs. He was tired but satisfied. The acquisition had been challenging, with moments when he thought it might fall apart. But his team had pulled through. Tonight, he would celebrate alone. Sometimes solitude was the greatest luxury for a man whose calendar was typically scheduled down to the minute. The heavy glass doors of Blackwell's Steakhouse swung open as Andre approached. The restaurant was known as the place where the city's most important business deals were either celebrated or mourned. The soft amber lighting inside created a warm glow against dark wood panels and white tablecloths. Piano music floated through the air, mixed with the quiet buzz of conversation and the occasional clink of glasses. The host, a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes, looked up from his reservation book. "Good evening," he said, his professional smile firmly in place. "Good evening. Reservation for Williams," Andre said, his deep voice carrying just enough to be heard over the ambient noise. The host's fingers froze momentarily on the page. His eyes flicked up to Andre's face, then back down to the book. "Williams," he repeated, scanning the list with more care than seemed necessary.
"Ah, yes.
"Andre Williams." He paused, his professional mask slipping just enough for Andre to notice. For one, Andre had seen this reaction countless times before. That brief hesitation, the double check, the slight surprise. Even in 2025, being a black CEO at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants sometimes caused these small hiccups in service. "Yes. Just me tonight," Andre confirmed, keeping his tone light. "Of course, sir. Right this way." Andre followed the host through the dining room, aware of the subtle glances from other diners. He had learned long ago to exist comfortably under this kind of attention. The stares didn't bother him like they once had. He had earned his place here and everywhere else. They passed tables of investment bankers in expensive suits, old money families who treated the restaurant like their personal dining room, and a few celebrities trying to look inconspicuous in corner booths. Andre recognized a tech billionaire who had tried to poach his head of engineering last year. They exchanged brief nods. "Will this table be suitable?" the host asked, gesturing to a small table along the wall. It was neither the best table nor the worst, just slightly less visible than where other solo diners of Andre's stature might have been seated. "Actually," Andre said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "I'd prefer something by the window if possible." He knew there were at least 3 empty window tables. He'd spotted them on the walk-in. The host hesitated for just a second too long. "Of course, Mr. Williams, please follow me." The window table offered a view of the city lights beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. It was also more centrally located, a statement in itself. Andre didn't always insist on such things, but tonight, after closing a $300 million deal, he wasn't in the mood to be tucked away in a corner. "Your server will be with you shortly," the host said, handing Andre a heavy leather-bound menu before retreating. Andre settled into his chair, allowing himself to feel the weight of the day lift from his shoulders. The deal was done. The papers were signed. 2 years of work had culminated in today's handshake. He looked down at his watch, a gift from his father when Andre had made his first million. His father hadn't lived to see what came after, the struggles and triumphs that followed. "If only you could see me now." "Dad?" Andre thought, running his thumb over the watch face. A waiter approached his table, a bottle of water in hand. "Good evening, sir. My name is Thomas, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." The young man poured water into Andre's glass with practiced precision.
Can I get you started with something from the bar?"
"Bourbon neat. Maker's 46 if you have it." "Excellent choice, sir. I'll be right back with that." "Our specials tonight include a 20-ounce bone-in ribeye dry-aged for 45 days and a Dover sole flown in this morning." Andre nodded, opening the menu as Thomas left to get his drink. The prices were unlisted, a sign that if you needed to ask, you probably couldn't afford it. Andre remembered the first time he'd eaten at a restaurant like this, fresh off his first round of venture funding. He'd been so nervous about making a mistake, about not belonging. Now he moved through these spaces with the quiet confidence of someone who had fought for his place at the table. He glanced at his phone. 3 new emails had arrived since he'd parked, one from his sister with pictures of his nephew's baseball game that he'd missed while preparing for today's meeting. One from his assistant confirming his flight to Singapore next week, and one from the other company's lawyer with the final signed documents. It was done. Really done. Thomas returned with the bourbon, placing it carefully on a small napkin. "Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" "I'll need a few minutes," Andre said, putting his phone away. Tonight was about savoring the moment, not rushing to the next task. "Of course, sir. Take your time." Thomas retreated with a small bow. Andre raised the glass to his lips, letting the amber liquid warm his throat. Through the window, he watched people hurrying home from work, some still in business attire, others already changed for evening plans. Everyone moving with purpose through the gathering darkness. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, growing up in a neighborhood where expectations were low. The computer programming books he'd checked out from the library again and again until he'd memorized them. The community college classes he'd taken while working 2 jobs. The first small business loan he'd secured when no one would give him venture capital. The investors who'd told him his ideas were good, but suggested he find a different type of person to be the face of the company. Andre had proven them all wrong. One day at a time, one deal at a time. He took another sip of bourbon, appreciating how the city lights reflected in the dark liquid. Today's acquisition would help thousands of young people like he once was. The educational software company he'd just purchased had programs in schools across the country. With RiseUp's resources behind it, they could reach millions more, especially in underserved communities. That had always been the point, not just success for its own sake, but success that opened doors for others. The dining room had filled up since he arrived. The hum of conversation grew louder, punctuated by occasional laughter. Andre noticed a table of executives from a competing firm glancing his way. News of the acquisition would be public tomorrow. Tonight they could only speculate. Thomas returned to the table. "Have you had a chance to decide, sir?" "I'll have the dry-aged ribeye medium rare with the truffle mashed potatoes and roasted asparagus. An excellent choice. Would you like to see the wine list?" "A glass of the Camus Cabernet would be perfect." Thomas nodded appreciatively. "I'll put your order in right away." As Thomas walked away, Andre noticed a woman at a nearby table watching him with interest. She smiled when their eyes met. Andre returned the smile politely before turning his attention back to the window. On another night, perhaps he would have been interested in the connection. Tonight, he wanted only his own company and thoughts. His phone vibrated again. A text from his mother. "Did you eat today?" Even now, with all his success, she worried about the basics. It made him smile. He quickly texted back, "At dinner now." The deal went through. "I'll call tomorrow with details." She responded immediately with a row of celebration emojis. Some things never changed, and he was grateful for that. As Andre waited for his meal, he allowed himself a rare moment of stillness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The merger would need to be managed carefully. There would be staff to reassure, systems to integrate, new goals to set. But tonight, in this small pocket of time between the achievement and what came next, he would simply be present. Little did he know that this quiet dinner was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would remind him why all the long hours and hard decisions mattered in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Andre sipped his bourbon slowly, savoring the warmth as it spread through his chest. The restaurant hummed with conversation around him, but he enjoyed this moment of solitude. After spending the entire day surrounded by lawyers, executives, and endless negotiations, the quiet felt like a luxury. He watched as the front door opened, letting in a gust of cool evening air and a group of laughing businessmen. Their voices carried across the restaurant as they were led to a large round table. One of them glanced over at Andre, did a double take, and whispered something to his companion. Andre was used to this, the recognition, the whispers. His face had been on the cover of Business Week just last month, highlighting RiseUp Technologies' meteoric rise and his unconventional path to success. The men nodded in his direction, and Andre raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. These small interactions were part of his daily life now, though they still felt strange sometimes. He remembered a time when he'd walk into rooms and be completely invisible. Now he couldn't go anywhere without being noticed. "Excuse me, Mr. Williams," a voice said, breaking into his thoughts. Andre looked up to see a young woman standing beside his table. She wasn't Thomas, his assigned waiter. She wore the same black and white uniform as the other servers, but her warm smile seemed genuine, not practiced. Her curly hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and a small pin on her collar read, "Olivia." "Thomas had a family emergency and had to leave suddenly," she explained. "I'll be taking care of you for the rest of your evening. I hope that's all right." "Of course," Andre said, setting down his nearly empty glass. "No problem at all. Can I get you another bourbon while you wait for your meal?" Olivia asked, gesturing to his glass. Andre considered for a moment. "Actually, I think I'll switch to the Cabernet now. Thomas mentioned you have Camus by the glass." Olivia's eyes lit up. "We do. It's one of my personal favorites, actually. Great choice with the ribeye." There was something refreshingly direct about her manner. In Andre's experience, servers at high-end restaurants often maintained a formal distance. But Olivia's approach was professional, yet warm. "Are you a wine enthusiast?" Andre asked, finding himself curious. "I'm working on it," she said with a small laugh. "I'm taking sommelier classes on my days off. This job helps. I get to learn about wines I could never afford to try otherwise." "That sounds fascinating," Andre said, genuinely interested. "How long have you been studying?" "About a year now. It's a whole world I never knew existed. The science behind it, the history, it's incredible." She paused, seeming to remember herself. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk your ear off. Let me get that Cabernet for you." "No need to apologize," Andre said. "It's refreshing to hear someone talk about what they're passionate about." Olivia smiled again, this time with a hint of relief. "I'll be right back with your wine." As she walked away, Andre found himself intrigued. In his position, people were careful about what they shared with him. Conversations were calculated, measured for potential advantage. Olivia's unguarded enthusiasm was a pleasant change. He turned his attention back to the window, watching as city lights began to dominate the darkening sky. In the reflection of the glass, he could see the restaurant behind him, the careful choreography of servers moving between tables, the slight tilt of heads in conversation, the occasional burst of laughter. Olivia returned promptly with a large wine glass, setting it down gently. "Here you are. I brought you our 2021 vintage. It's drinking beautifully right now." Andre took a sip, letting the rich flavors develop on his palate. "You're right. It's excellent. Your steak should be out in just a few minutes," she added. "Our chef is being particularly careful with it." "He recognized your name." Andre raised an eyebrow. "Is that good or bad?" Olivia laughed, the sound natural and unrestrained. "Definitely good. He's a big admirer of what you've done with your foundation. His nephew participated in one of your coding camps last summer." This caught Andre by surprise. His educational foundation was important to him, but it wasn't the part of his work that usually got recognition, especially not in circles like these. "Really? Which camp?" he asked. "The one downtown, I think." The chef mentioned that his nephew was from a family that couldn't afford a computer, and your program provided laptops for all the participants. Changed the kid's life, apparently. He's applying to MIT now. Andre felt a wave of satisfaction that outweighed even the major business deal he'd closed earlier. The foundation had been his personal project, started with his own money before the company was profitable enough to contribute. He'd insisted that a percentage of profits always go toward educational initiatives in underserved communities. That's good to hear," Andre said, feeling uncharacteristically at a loss for words. In boardrooms, he was known for his eloquence, but genuine moments like this sometimes left him searching for the right response. "Sorry if I'm being too forward," Olivia said, noticing his reaction. "It's just not every day we get someone in here who's making a real difference, you know?" Before Andre could respond, another server appeared with his meal. The plate was a work of art, a perfectly seared ribeye with a caramelized crust, golden mashed potatoes with visible flecks of truffle, and bright green asparagus arranged in a fan. "Your ribeye, sir," Olivia said, suddenly more formal as her colleague placed the plate in front of Andre. "Is there anything else I can get for you right now?" "This looks perfect," Andre said, inhaling the rich aroma. "Thank you." As the other server walked away, Olivia lingered for a moment. Enjoy your meal, Mr. Williams. I'll check on you in a bit. Andre nodded, turning his attention to the steak before him. He cut into it, finding it cooked exactly as he'd requested, a warm red center with a perfect sear on the outside. The first bite confirmed what his eyes had told him. It was exceptional. As he ate, Andre found his thoughts returning to what Olivia had said about the chef's nephew. It was easy to get caught up in the numbers. How many students they'd reached, how many laptops they'd distributed, how many coding hours they'd funded. But each of those numbers represented a real person, a life potentially changed by access to tools and knowledge that Andre had taken for granted in his own journey. He looked around the restaurant, at the wealth and privilege on display. Most of the diners here tonight probably had no idea what it was like to be the only kid in class without a computer, to feel that particular shame of being left behind through no fault of your own. Andre knew that feeling intimately. It had fueled him for years, pushing him to work harder, to prove himself in rooms where no one expected him to succeed. The food was excellent, but Andre found himself eating more slowly than usual, savoring not just the meal but the moment. There was something about tonight that felt different, a shift he couldn't quite name. Olivia returned when his plate was half empty. "How is everything?" "Incredible," Andre said honestly. "Compliments to the chef. I'll let him know. Can I get you anything else?" "I'm all set for now, thanks." As Olivia turned to check on another table, Andre noticed a small group of diners near the bar pointing in his direction, phones in hand. He was used to this too, the not-so-subtle photos, the social media posts about celebrity sightings. Usually it was just an annoyance, part of the cost of success, but tonight it grated on him more than usual. He returned his focus to his meal, trying to recapture the peaceful moment he'd been enjoying. The steak was still perfect, the wine still excellent, but something had shifted in the atmosphere. He felt the familiar weight of visibility settling back onto his shoulders. By the time Olivia returned, Andre had finished his meal, pushing the plate away with reluctance. "Can I tempt you with dessert?" she asked, clearing his plate. "Our pastry chef makes an amazing bourbon chocolate cake that would pair nicely with an espresso." Andre considered the offer. He typically skipped dessert, mindful of the early morning workouts that kept him sharp and focused. But tonight felt different, like an occasion worth marking. "You know what? That sounds perfect," he said. Olivia's smile widened. "Excellent choice. I'll put that in right away." As she walked away with his plate, Andre noticed her stop briefly at the kitchen entrance, exchanging words with someone just inside the door. The chef, perhaps. She laughed at something said, then glanced back at Andre with an expression he couldn't quite read. There was something happening beneath the surface of this ordinary dinner, a current he couldn't identify. Andre had built his career on reading people and situations, on anticipating moves before they happened. But tonight, in this restaurant, he felt a step behind some unfolding event. He took another sip of his wine, watching as Olivia moved efficiently between tables. There was an energy to her movements, a barely contained excitement that seemed out of place in the formal setting of Blackwell's Steakhouse. The bourbon chocolate cake arrived with an artfully prepared espresso, both presented with flourish. But as Olivia set down the dessert, Andre noticed something unusual. A small folded paper tucked partially beneath the saucer. "Enjoy your dessert, Mr. Williams," Olivia said, meeting his eyes with that same unreadable expression. Then she was gone, moving to another table before he could question her. Andre looked at the folded paper, curiosity piqued. A bill would come at the end of the meal, not with dessert. A business card, perhaps? But why the secrecy? He reached for the paper, unfolding it carefully. As he read the neatly written words inside, the bustling restaurant around him seemed to fade away, the noise dimming to a distant murmur. The world narrowed to just this moment, just these words. And everything, the acquisition, the dinner, the day itself, shifted into a new perspective. Andre stared at the folded paper in his hands, momentarily forgetting about the decadent chocolate cake waiting before him. The restaurant's ambient noise seemed to fade as he focused on the neat handwriting that filled the small note. "Mr. Williams," it began, "you don't know me, but I know what you've done. My brother David was part of the Rise Up coding program in the Oakwood district last year. Before that program, he was failing school and hanging with the wrong crowd. Our mom works 3 jobs, and there wasn't anyone watching him after school. Then your foundation came to his school." Andre felt his throat tighten as he continued reading. The laptop he received wasn't just a computer. It was the first thing that was truly his, that no one could take away. The coding skills weren't just lessons. They gave him a language that made sense when nothing else did. He's now at the top of his class and applying to MIT next fall with a full scholarship application in progress. I've never seen him so focused, so proud of himself. The note continued. I don't usually do this at work. I could probably get in trouble. But when I saw your name on the reservation list, I couldn't let you eat here without knowing what you've done for my family. Because of you, my brother has a future he never thought possible. Because of you, he's seen what he can become. It was signed simply, Grateful Olivia Torres. Andre read the note a second time, then a third. The bourbon chocolate cake sat untouched, its aroma wafting up unnoticed. The espresso grew cold beside it. None of that mattered now. He sat perfectly still, the paper trembling slightly in his fingers. People around him continued their meals, their conversations, their business deals and celebrations. But Andre had stepped outside the flow of time. In this frozen moment, he was caught between his past and the future he was helping to create. His mind flashed back to his own childhood, to the tiny apartment where he'd grown up. He remembered the community center where he'd first touched a computer, an ancient machine donated by a local business. He remembered staying until closing time every day, teaching himself to code with outdated manuals, the staff eventually giving him a key so he could lock up when he left. He remembered the teacher who'd noticed his talent, who'd fought to get him into advanced classes, the guidance counselor who'd helped him apply for scholarships, the string of people who'd seen something in him when the world was determined to see nothing at all. And now, decades later, he was that person for someone else. Not just in the abstract way he'd always thought about his foundation, as numbers on spreadsheets, as tax write-offs, as good PR for the company, but in a real, tangible way that had changed the course of someone's life. Is everything all right with your dessert, Mr. Williams? Olivia's voice broke through his reverie. She stood by his table, concern evident on her face. Only then did Andre realize that tears had formed in his eyes. He quickly blinked them away, clearing his throat. The dessert looks wonderful, he said, carefully folding the note and slipping it into his jacket pocket. But this... He paused, searching for the right words. Your note, I don't even know what to say. Olivia's professional demeanor softened. I'm sorry if it was inappropriate. No, Andre interrupted gently. Not inappropriate at all. He took a deep breath. Thank you for telling me about your brother. What was his name again? David, she said, her own voice thick with emotion now. David Torres. David, Andre repeated, committing the name to memory. And he's applying to MIT? Olivia nodded. For computer science. The counselor from your program has been helping him with the application process. His grades are good enough, but we're worried about the financial aspect, even with scholarships. Andre nodded thoughtfully. MIT is expensive, but there are ways. He hesitated, then made a decision. Would you sit down for a moment? Just for a minute? Olivia glanced around the restaurant nervously. I'm not really supposed to... Just for a minute, Andre said. Please. After a brief hesitation, Olivia slid into the chair across from him, perching on the edge as if ready to jump up at any moment. Tell me more about David, Andre said. What kind of coding does he enjoy? Something in Olivia relaxed as she began talking about her brother. He loves creating games, not just playing them, making them. He started with simple things, but now he's building these complex worlds. He stays up all night sometimes, lost in it. I don't understand half of what he talks about, but I've never seen him so alive. Andre listened intently, recognizing the passion in her description. He'd felt that same obsessive drive, that same joy in building something from nothing, stringing together lines of code that could create entire realities. And your mother, you mentioned she works 3 jobs. Olivia's expression grew more serious. Yeah, cleaning office buildings at night, home healthcare aid in the mornings, and retail on weekends. She's barely home, barely sleeps. She's doing everything she can to keep us afloat. Andre nodded, a familiar ache in his chest. His own mother had worked similar hours, coming home exhausted, but still finding time to check his homework, to make sure he was eating, to tell him she believed in him even when evidence suggested he was fighting an impossible battle. The program has been good for her too, Olivia continued. Seeing David thrive, Knowing he has a shot at something better, it gives her hope on the hard days. Around them, the restaurant continued its evening rhythm. Waiters moved gracefully between tables. Dishes clinked softly. Laughter bubbled up from a nearby group celebrating something. But at this table, something profound was happening. A connection formed across the divides of class and circumstance, linked by shared experience and unexpected gratitude. "I should get back to work," Olivia said finally, glancing toward the kitchen where a manager had appeared, surveying the dining room. "I don't want to get in trouble." "Of course," Andre said. "I've kept you too long already." As Olivia stood, Andre made another decision. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a business card. Not the standard corporate one he usually carried, but his personal card with his direct number. "Please give this to David," he said, writing something on the back before handing it to her. "Tell him to call me. I'd like to talk with him about MIT and other possibilities." Olivia took the card with wide eyes, glancing at what he'd written. "A personal recommendation? Mr. Williams, that's too much. You don't even know him." "I know enough," Andre said simply. "I know where he's from and where he wants to go. Sometimes that's all you need to know about someone." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but she blinked them back quickly, slipping the card into her pocket. "Thank you. I don't know what else to say." "No more thanks needed," Andre said. "Just tell David to call me." As Olivia hurried back to her duties, Andre finally turned to his dessert. The cake was rich and decadent, the espresso now cooled to the perfect temperature, but he barely tasted either. His mind was elsewhere, traveling between past and present, between his own journey and the one that young David Torres was just beginning. From across the restaurant, Andre noticed several of the staff watching him with new interest. The chef had emerged from the kitchen and was speaking with Olivia near the bar, both of them glancing his way occasionally. Word had spread, it seemed. He was no longer just a wealthy patron or a business celebrity, but something more meaningful to the people serving him tonight. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another email, another demand for his attention. For once he let it go unanswered. Tonight had become about something more important than business. As he finished his dessert, Andre felt a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The daily pressures of running a billion-dollar company, the board meetings, the quarterly reports, the endless decisions that affected thousands of employees, had a way of obscuring the original purpose behind it all. Success had brought comfort and influence, but somewhere along the way he'd lost sight of why he'd wanted those things in the first place. Tonight was a reminder, not just of where he'd come from, but of what his work could mean when it touched individual lives. Not abstract communities or underprivileged youth, but real people with names and dreams and obstacles to overcome. People like David Torres. People like a younger version of himself. When Olivia returned with his bill, there was a new ease between them. The formality of server and patron softened by shared understanding. "The chef wanted me to tell you that dessert is on the house," she said, placing the leather folder on the table. "His way of saying thank you for what you've done for his nephew. And for my brother." Andre nodded his appreciation. "Please thank him for me." The meal was excellent. As he signed the check, adding a tip that would likely equal several days of Olivia's regular wages, Andre made plans in his head. The Rise Up Foundation had resources, connections, mentorship programs. David Torres wouldn't be the only one to benefit. There were thousands of Davids out there waiting for the same opportunity. The deal he'd closed today would add millions to the company's bottom line. Tomorrow, in the board meeting, he would propose increasing the foundation's budget. 10% of the acquisition's value, earmarked specifically for expanding the coding programs to more schools, more districts, more kids who just needed someone to see their potential. Some of the board members would resist, arguing that the money could be better spent on research or marketing or dividends for shareholders. They always did. But tonight had reminded Andre why those arguments couldn't be allowed to win, not when lives like David's hung in the balance. As he prepared to leave, Andre took one last look around the restaurant. In a strange way, he felt more himself here tonight than he had in the glass-walled executive suite where he'd spent most of the day. More connected to the person he'd been and the person he still wanted to be. He carefully folded Olivia's note and placed it in his wallet, a tangible reminder of what really mattered. Then he stood, straightened his tie, and headed for the door, knowing that tomorrow would bring challenges, but feeling, for the first time in a long while, absolutely certain of his purpose. The cool night air hit Andre's face as he stepped outside the restaurant. The valet spotted him immediately and hurried to retrieve his car, but Andre held up his hand. "I think I'll walk for a bit," he said, handing the young man a generous tip anyway. "Could you tell me which direction the waterfront is?" 3 blocks that way, sir," the valet replied, pointing east. "Are you sure about the walk?" "It's getting chilly." "I'm sure," Andre said, buttoning his suit jacket. "I need to clear my head." As he walked away from the restaurant, the city felt different somehow. The same buildings towered overhead, the same traffic flowed past, the same mix of people hurried along the sidewalks, but Andre experienced it all with new eyes. His encounter with Olivia had shifted something fundamental inside him. He reached into his pocket and touched the note she had given him, now carefully folded and tucked away like something precious. In many ways it was. That small piece of paper represented everything he had been working toward all these years, though he hadn't fully realized it until tonight. The sidewalk sloped gently downward as he approached the waterfront. Ahead he could see the river glittering with reflected city lights, the water dark and deep beyond the illuminated shoreline. A few couples strolled along the promenade despite the evening chill. A street musician played saxophone under a lamppost, the mournful notes floating on the breeze. Andre found an empty bench facing the water and sat down, loosening his tie. The events of the day, the acquisition, the celebratory dinner, Olivia's note, swirled in his mind. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the saxophone's melancholy tune wash over him. When he opened them again, his gaze fell on a family walking past, a father holding the hand of a small boy, perhaps 5 or 6 years old. The child was pointing excitedly at a passing boat, its running lights cutting through the darkness. Andre watched them, thinking about paths and possibilities, about the invisible threads that connect past to future. His own path had been unlikely, to say the least. Born to a single mother in a neighborhood where ambition was often crushed before it could fully form, where expectations rarely extended beyond survival, where success stories were so rare they took on an almost mythical quality. Andre remembered sitting on the stoop of their apartment building as a child, watching the men in suits who occasionally drove through the neighborhood, looking at real estate opportunities. People said, though nothing ever seemed to come of it. Those men, with their confident walks and shiny cars, had seemed like visitors from another planet. "That could be you someday," his mother had told him once, nodding toward a black man in an expensive suit, climbing into a luxury car across the street. Andre, no more than 10 at the time, had laughed at the absurdity of it. "For real, baby," she'd insisted, her hands rough from cleaning other people's homes but gentle on his shoulder. "Don't you let anybody tell you what you can't be." Andre shifted on the bench, the memory so vivid it almost hurt. His mother had believed in him when belief seemed foolish, had seen possibilities when everyone else saw limitations, had worked herself to exhaustion to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table while he studied and dreamed and built the foundation of the life he now lived. She hadn't lived to see rise up. Technology's become a billion-dollar company. Hadn't lived to see her son's face on magazine covers or his name on lists of the most influential business leaders in the country. Cancer had taken her just as his first major software was gaining traction, just before the investment that would change everything. But she had lived long enough to see him graduate college, to see him turn down lucrative job offers to start his own company, to know that the faith she'd placed in him hadn't been misplaced after all. "I wish you could see this, Mom," Andre whispered to the night. "I wish you could see what your belief helped create." The Rise Up Foundation had been her idea in a way. In the hospital during those final weeks, she'd made him promise to remember where he came from, to use whatever success he achieved to open doors for others. "Your story doesn't mean anything if it stops with you," she'd told him, her voice weak but her eyes fierce with conviction. Andre had established the foundation with his first real profits, naming it not after himself but after the ethos that had guided him from the beginning. Rise up above circumstances, above expectations, above the limitations others try to impose. In the years since, as the company grew exponentially and demanded more and more of his attention, the foundation had become something he oversaw from a distance. He attended the annual fundraising gala. He approved budgets and occasionally reviewed program outcomes. He used it as a talking point in interviews about corporate responsibility. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of the individual lives being affected. The real people behind the statistics in those glossy annual reports, people like David Torres. Andre pulled out his phone and opened his calendar app. Tomorrow was packed with meetings about the acquisition, legal briefings, PR strategy sessions, calls with key investors. The usual machinery of corporate success grinding ever forward. With a few quick taps, he rescheduled everything before noon, creating a block of time simply labeled Foundation Visit. His assistant would have questions, his executive team would have objections, but for once, those concerns felt secondary. He needed to see the programs in action, needed to meet the kids whose lives were being changed, needed to reconnect with the purpose that had started it all. The saxophone player had moved on to a more upbeat tune now, something with a hopeful lilt that matched Andre's shifting mood. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and stood up, ready to continue his walk along the waterfront. As he strolled, his mind turned to David Torres, the young man he'd never met but who had unexpectedly changed the course of his evening, and perhaps much more. A talented coder with dreams of MIT, growing up in circumstances not so different from Andre's own. A young man who, with the right support, might someday sit where Andre sat now, at the helm of his own company, in a position to hold doors open for others coming up behind him. That was the real legacy worth building. Not just personal wealth or corporate power, but a chain of opportunity extending far beyond himself, a succession of doors held open, of hands extended, of belief offered when it was needed most. The cool night air filled Andre's lungs as he walked, each breath feeling cleaner and more purposeful than the last. The weight of the day's negotiations, the constant pressure of leadership seemed to lift slightly from his shoulders. In their place was something lighter but stronger, a renewed sense of purpose, a reconnection to the fire that had first driven him forward. He thought of the note in his pocket, of Olivia's grateful words. He thought of her brother David applying to MIT, standing at the threshold of possibility. He thought of his own journey and all the people who had helped make it possible. Teachers who stayed late to give him extra help. Community center staff who looked the other way when he stayed past closing time. The first investor who took a chance on him when banks wouldn't give him the time of day. None of us makes it alone, Andre reflected. Success is never solely our own. His phone buzzed with an incoming call, his VP of operations, probably wondering about the sudden calendar changes. Andre silenced it without answering. There would be time for explanations tomorrow. Tonight was for remembering, for reconnecting with the why behind everything he'd built. Near the end of the promenade, Andre came upon a small gathering watching a street performer, a young man manipulating glowing LED balls in complex patterns. The crowd was diverse, tourists with cameras, local couples on evening walks, a few business people still in work clothes, children watching with wide-eyed wonder. Andre stopped to watch, finding himself standing next to a boy of about 12, who was studying the performer's movements with intense concentration. Something about the boy's focus, the intelligence in his eyes, reminded Andre of himself at that age, analyzing, breaking down complicated processes, figuring out how things worked. Pretty cool, right? Andre said to the boy. The boy nodded without taking his eyes off the performance. I'm trying to figure out the pattern. There's a mathematical sequence to it, I think. Andre smiled, not surprised. You like math? Yeah, the boy said, still watching. And computers. I'm teaching myself to code, but we don't have great internet at home, so it's hard. A woman standing nearby, the boy's mother, Andre guessed, gave a tired smile. He's always been good with numbers. His teachers say he could really go places if he had more resources. The familiar story hit Andre like a physical force. How many brilliant minds were out there right now, constrained not by ability but by circumstance? How many potential innovations, solutions, transformative ideas were being lost because talent couldn't connect with opportunity? The LED performer finished his routine with a flourish, the glowing balls forming a perfect helix before going dark. The crowd applauded, and people began dropping money into his open case. Andre reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, not the one he'd given Olivia for her brother, but another from the same slim case. He hesitated only briefly before handing it to the boy's mother. Rise Up Technologies has a coding program for middle and high school students, he explained. Full scholarships, equipment provided. They meet on weekends at the downtown community center. Your son might be interested. The woman took the card, glancing at it curiously. "Are you with the program?" Andre smiled. "You could say that. Just tell them Andre Williams sent you." Without waiting for the recognition that might follow, Andre nodded goodbye and continued walking. Behind him, he heard the mother's surprised intake of breath as she made the connection. But he was already moving forward, his mind racing ahead to tomorrow and beyond. By the time he reached the end of the promenade and turned back toward where his car waited, Andre had mentally drafted an email to his foundation director, outlining an expanded vision for their educational programs. More locations, more participants, more pathways to internships and college scholarships, more connections between the kids in those programs, and the opportunities that Rise Up Technologies could provide. The acquisition he'd completed today had been important for the company's bottom line, but what he was planning now felt important in a different, deeper way, a way that connected directly to why he'd started the company in the first place. As the restaurant came back into view, Andre touched the note in his pocket one last time, a tangible reminder of impact, of purpose, of lives changed by opportunity given and received. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, new decisions to make. But tonight had brought something infinitely more valuable, a reconnection with purpose, a reminder of what truly mattered. And for that unexpected gift, Andre was profoundly grateful. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Andre's corner office, casting long rectangles of light across the polished concrete floor. It was barely 7 a.m., but he'd been at his desk for an hour already, energized in a way he hadn't felt in years. On his computer screen was an email to the board of directors outlining his proposal to triple the Rise Up Foundation's budget, effective immediately. The words had flowed easily, fueled by the clarity he'd found during last night's walk along the waterfront. He read through it one more time, then hit send without hesitation. Moments later, his assistant Michelle appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand. "You're in early," she observed, setting the cup on his desk. "And you've rearranged your entire morning." "The legal team is not happy," Andre smiled, taking a sip of the coffee. "They're never happy. That's why they're lawyers." Michelle raised an eyebrow, clearly noticing something different about her boss. "Does this have something to do with the acquisition? Is there a problem I should know about?" "No problem," Andre assured her. "The deal is solid. I just need to visit the Foundation's downtown program this morning. It's important." "More important than the post-acquisition briefing with the executive team?" Michelle asked, checking her tablet. "They've been preparing all week for this." Andre leaned back in his chair, considering how to explain the shift that had occurred within him. How could he put into words the way a simple note from a waitress had reconnected him to his purpose? How a stranger's gratitude had reminded him why he'd built this company in the first place? "Tell the team I'll be there by noon," he said finally, "and have my car brought around in 20 minutes. There's something I need to see for myself." Michelle nodded, still curious but professional as always. "Anything else you need before you go?" Andre thought for a moment. "Yes, could you pull the file on a student named David Torres? He's in our coding program at Oakwood High. And see if we have a direct number for Olivia Torres, likely his sister or relative." "Consider it done," Michelle said, making a note. "And the board email you just sent? They're going to have questions about tripling the foundation budget." "I'm counting on it," Andre replied with a smile. After Michelle left, Andre turned to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, people like David Torres were getting ready for school, unaware that their lives were about to change. Somewhere, Olivia was perhaps getting ready for another shift at the restaurant, unaware that her simple act of gratitude had sparked something significant. Andre's phone buzzed. The first responses from board members were already coming in. As expected, most expressed concern about the proposed budget increase. One bluntly asked if this was some kind of PR move to offset potential negative press from the acquisition. Andre set the phone aside. They would understand eventually, or they wouldn't. Either way, his mind was made up. The community center looked much the same as it had 20 years ago, when Andre had spent his afternoons there, hunched over an outdated computer in the corner of the reading room. The brick exterior was a bit more weathered, the front steps more worn. But the spirit of the place remained unchanged, a haven of opportunity in a neighborhood where opportunity was often in short supply. Andre parked his car across the street. deliberately leaving his suit jacket behind. In his button-down shirt and slacks, he looked less like the CEO whose face occasionally appeared in business magazines and more like any other visitor. The Rise Up Foundation's weekend coding program wouldn't start for another hour, but the center's director, Teresa Washington, was expecting him. What she wasn't expecting was the CEO himself rather than a foundation representative. "Mr. Williams," she exclaimed when he walked into her small office. "When they said someone from Rise Up was coming to observe the program, I never imagined. I mean, it's an honor to meet you, sir." Andre shook her hand warmly. "Please call me Andre, and thank you for accommodating my last-minute visit. I wanted to see the program in action." Teresa, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, recovered quickly from her surprise. "Well, you're in for a treat. These kids are doing remarkable things with the resources you've provided. Would you like a tour before the students arrive?" The next 45 minutes were eye-opening as Teresa showed him around the center. The computer lab, once a cramped room with a few donated desktops, now housed 30 high-performance laptops, each loaded with professional-grade software. The once dingy meeting room had been transformed into a bright, modern classroom with interactive displays and comfortable furniture. "This is all from your foundation," Teresa explained, pride evident in her voice. "Before Rise Up stepped in, we were making do with computers so old they couldn't run basic software. Now our students are creating apps, building websites, even experimenting with AI." As they walked, Teresa shared stories of students whose lives had been changed by the program. The shy girl who now led a team developing a community resource app. The troublemaker who discovered a talent for cybersecurity and was now mentoring younger students. The refugee who used coding skills to help his family start an online business. Each story hit Andre like a physical force, reminding him of what was possible when talent met opportunity. By the time students began arriving for the Saturday session, he was filled with a quiet determination that this was just the beginning. "Mr. Washington," he said as they watched kids file into the computer lab, "what would you do if you had double the resources?" "Triple," Teresa looked at him thoughtfully. "Honestly? We'd expand to more centers. We have waiting lists at every location. We'd hire more instructors, create more advanced courses for returning students, maybe start a formal internship pipeline into tech companies." She paused. "Why do you ask?" "Just thinking about possibilities," Andre replied. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a lanky teenager with bright, intelligent eyes and a worn backpack covered in coding-related stickers. He stopped short when he saw Andre, recognition dawning on his face. "You're Andre Williams," the boy said, his voice caught between awe and disbelief. You're like my hero." Andre felt a strange tightness in his chest. "What's your name?" "David. David Torres." The world seemed to still for a moment as Andre took in the young man standing before him. The brother Olivia had written about in her note. The reason Andre had come here today. In person, David was exactly as Andre had imagined, bright-eyed, eager, standing at the threshold of possibility. "Your sister told me about you," Andre said finally, extending his hand. "I heard you're applying to MIT." David's eyes widened further. "You talked to Olivia? Wait, you were at Blackwell's last night. That's where she works. She didn't tell me she met you. It was a brief conversation," Andre said, smiling at the coincidence, or perhaps fate, that had brought him face to face with David so quickly. "But meaningful. I understand you're doing some impressive work here." David's initial awe gave way to genuine enthusiasm as he began describing his current project, a game designed to teach financial literacy to younger kids. His hands moved animatedly as he explained the coding challenges he'd overcome, the algorithms he'd developed, the user testing he'd conducted with his younger cousins. Andre listened, recognition flooding through him. He had been this boy once, full of ideas, hungry for knowledge, eager to prove himself in a world that often seemed designed to hold him back. "I'd love to see this game," Andre said when David paused for breath. "Maybe you could show me." David's face lit up. "For real? You want to see my code?" "I really do." As they walked toward the computer lab, other students began to notice Andre's presence. Whispers spread through the room. The CEO of Rise Up Technologies was here, in their community center, talking to one of their own as if they were equals. For the next 2 hours, Andre moved from student to student, looking at projects, asking questions, offering suggestions. He sat beside a girl working on a website for her mother's catering business, helping her debug a particularly tricky piece of JavaScript. He listened as a group of boys explained their idea for an app that would connect neighborhood residents with local resources. In each young face, he saw possibility. In each project, no matter how simple or complex, he saw the seeds of transformation, not just for these individuals, but for their families, their communities, perhaps someday the world. When his phone buzzed with a reminder about the executive meeting back at headquarters, Andre silenced it without checking. The corporate world could wait. These young minds, these budding creators, was where the real future was being shaped. "Mr. Williams," Teresa said, approaching him as he worked with a student on a coding problem, "there's someone here to see you." Andre looked up to find Olivia standing in the doorway of the computer lab, still in her uniform from what must have been a breakfast shift at the restaurant. Her eyes were wide as she took in the scene. Her brother and a dozen other students clustered around the billionaire CEO who was supposed to be running a global technology company but was instead helping them debug code on a Saturday. "Morning, Olivia," Andre said, standing to greet her. "I was hoping to see you again." "They called me from the center," she explained, still looking somewhat dazed. "Said you were here working with David. I thought they were joking." "No joke," Andre assured her. "Your brother is incredibly talented. MIT would be lucky to have him." David beamed at the praise, looking between his sister and his hero with undisguised happiness. Mr. Williams, looked at my financial literacy game. He had some amazing suggestions for the user interface. "Andre is fine," Andre said. "And I meant what I said about calling me to discuss MIT. In fact," he glanced at Teresa, who nodded encouragingly, "I'd like to talk to both of you about some possibilities." Over the next half hour, in Teresa's small office, Andre outlined a proposal, a formal internship at Rise Up Technologies for David, with flexible hours around his school schedule, a scholarship fund that would cover whatever MIT's financial aid didn't, and a position for Olivia in the Rise Up Foundation's community outreach team. If she was interested, "Why would you do all this for us?" Olivia asked, tears threatening despite her best efforts. "You don't even know us." Andre thought about the question carefully before answering. 20 years ago, I was sitting in the same community center, teaching myself to code on a donated computer that crashed every 20 minutes. Someone saw potential in me and opened a door. Now it's my turn to do the same. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Olivia's note from the night before. This reminded me why I started Rise Up in the first place. Not just to build technology or make money, but to create pathways for talent that might otherwise go undiscovered. As they left the community center together, Andre, Olivia, and David, plans already taking shape for a future none of them could have imagined 24 hours earlier, Andre felt a sense of rightness settle over him. The acquisition, the board meeting, the corporate machinery would all be waiting for him on Monday morning. But something had fundamentally shifted in how he would approach it all. What had begun as a simple dinner, a black CEO ordering a steak to celebrate a business victory, had transformed into something far more significant, a reconnection with purpose, a reminder of the power of gratitude, and the beginning of a circle of opportunity that would ripple outward in ways none of them could fully predict. And it had all started with a waitress's secret message, scrawled on a small piece of paper and delivered with a slice of bourbon chocolate cake.